terrible circumstance, yes. But we can learn something interesting from this. And it really just goes back to that quote from Ra's al Ghul. Pay attention to your surroundings. In order to pay attention to your surroundings, you need information, new updated information about the area in which you are currently residing. And number two, you need all of your senses fully functioning and online. Both are critical. You need to have an understanding. Let me just put it this way. If you want to reduce the probability of you walking into a problematic, dangerous, risky circumstance, you need to do two things. You need to acquire new information, new updated information about the area in which you are currently based, or the area to which you are traveling. That new updated information about the area is going to provide you with critical feedback about that area. And if you pass that test, if the area passes that test with respect to being relatively safe and having a low probability of you getting your arse blown off by some gunman, then the second thing that you need to do is you need to have all of your senses online. Your hearing, your sight, your smell, and then touch and taste if you need to. But predominantly your sight, your hearing, and your smell. Why do you need all of your senses online? Because even if you have done a very diligent background check on an area, and you figured out, based on using powerful tools provided to you by the internet, AI, or getting in contact with other people who live in these areas or who have visited these areas, or using some other resource on the internet, combining them all together, you've got all this information, you've got a very up-to-date understanding of this area to which you are traveling, or an area in which you are currently residing. So you've got all the information, this updated information, and let's say you're happy and you're like, okay, the probability of me walking into a problematic circumstance is actually quite low. Good. Okay. That's the first important thing that I needed to do. But the second thing that you need to do is to not turn your brain and your senses off. You still need to keep a certain amount of awareness and vigilance with respect to the area in which you are currently living. And what does that involve? That involves you keeping all of your senses online, particularly your smell, your vision, and your hearing. You need to keep these senses online. You shouldn't be wearing headphones. You shouldn't be going out with a blindfold on. And you shouldn't be shoving something up your nose so you can't smell. In an ideal scenario, you want to keep all of your senses online. Incidentally, folks, this is why when you have a cold, it's such a pain in the arse. And this is the way I think of a cold. Whenever I get a cold, the whole idea of having a sore head or maybe some lousy well-being, I don't really give a shit about that. The thing that really irritates me about a cold is that it knocks off some of my senses. Whenever I have a cold, I can't smell and I can't taste. And this is a fucking problem. And that's how I think of it. It's a problem because if I can't smell, for all I know, there could be some sort of a dangerous gas in the air. There could be some toxic gas in the air, and because I can't smell anything, I'm getting bathed in this toxic gas without knowing it. And then I'm wondering why I'm feeling woozy and unwell. Same thing with taste. If I can't taste anything, it makes it difficult for me to, for example, if I've got a food that I'm about to eat and it's actually going off, it's starting to rot a little bit. It's starting to go sour. If I don't have any taste because I have the cold, it becomes more difficult for me to actually pick up those cues. And so I could end up eating something that if I had had all of my senses intact, I would have been able to immediately spit it out and understand, oh yeah, that's a problematic food, I shouldn't eat that. And so that's what pisses me off about the cold. I can't smell anything and I can't taste anything. And that puts me in a relative position of weakness compared to where I would be if I had all 5 senses firing on all cylinders. So this is the thing when I'm saying this. You need to have, in an ideal world, all of your senses online. Don't be going out with a blindfold on so that you can't see. That is going to present a very obvious problem for you. Don't be going out with headphones and earphones on, because it's the same thing. You're eliminating one of your key senses. And so you have now eliminated an important source of feedback from the environment. Same thing with your smell, taste, touch, all of these things. So, anyway, keep your senses online and be paying attention. You don't need to be paranoid. Nobody's asking you to be paranoid. You just need to be paying attention. Have some awareness. Be perceptive. Pay attention to your area. Run the background check on the area and then keep all of your senses online. So that it means in the very unlikely event, because remember you've already vetted the area, in the very unlikely event that something does happen and some crazy wingnut comes out of the blue, at least you have all of your senses online. Why is it so important to keep all of your senses online? Your hearing, your vision, your smell, your taste, your touch. Why is this so important? Because if you start to knock multiple senses offline by wearing headphones or going out with a blindfold on, then you have an increased probability of being exploited. And we don't want to be exploited. Nobody likes the feeling of when they are being taken advantage of. Nobody likes that. Exploitation doesn't feel good. So why literally increase your probability of being exploited when you can actually reduce it by something as simple as keeping all of your senses online and then running a background check on the area in which you are currently living or an area to which you're traveling. And you should always be updating your nervous system, your brain. You should always be bringing in new information. Because there's no point, as I said, there's no point in going off old, outdated information. If you traveled to Spain 6 years ago, there's no point in using that old data set, using that old information. You need to get updated information because Spain, for all you know, might have changed in the last 6 years. Or the area that you used to go to in Spain, it may have been lovely and beautiful and a great safe place. But perhaps 6 years later, some international friends may now be colonizing that part of Spain, for all you know. And so it isn't quite what it was 6 years ago. You need to know that. And so you need to be constantly updating your information in your own head, making sure that you're bringing in new information to displace the old information and keep the system updated, just like your laptop, just like your phone. Because that way, you're going to reduce the probability of error or walking into a problematic circumstance.